Well, usually I do go low in the middle of the week, but I don't know about you. I just watched the final 18 holes of the Players, watched a lot of it the last couple days. Had a lot of money riding on my guys, Hideki Matsuyama and Sahith Theegala, who came through, baby. Way to come through, boys. And wow, what a finale. What an ending for Wyndham Clark. And honestly, what a performance. An all-timer from Scottie Scheffler. Just drubs those three. Xander, Wyndham Clark, and Harman. I mean, he beat them by a combined 15 shots. So all-time stuff, becomes the first winner of this tournament in back-to-back years. I mean, you're talking about Phil, Tiger, Jack, Greg Norman, like every player worth their salt, Freddie Couples, over the last 50 plus years has won this tournament, and none of them have defended it until this guy, who had some injury going on, battled through it. Wow. Stunned. Honestly, it wasn't that stunning as the day started playing out, but we'll dive into Scottie Scheffler. Xander, let's face it, a little underwhelming, very underwhelming. I think Wyndham Clark showed something today. I want to dive into that. And then just some overall thoughts on gambling, because, man, I'm hot. The tournament, the course, and I think we finally got what we've been waiting for. But before we dive into it all, I got to tell you about my friends. Game Time. Go to your smartphone, download the Game Time app. Download the Game Time app, the official ticketing app of this podcast. Promo code GOLOW, GOLOW, gets you $20 off your first pair of tickets. Very, very easy to use and save a little money. I saw a lot of people saying if you ever get the opportunity, it's in Jacksonville, Florida area, Ponte Vedra. Go to that tournament. How fun does that tournament look? That area on 17, people just hanging out, drinking beers. That seems like a bucket list event for me, definitely in my life, to get to Sawgrass. But wow, what an environment. And you can do that. So just download that. Download the Game Time app. Promo code GOLOW. Games, concerts, comedy shows. They have you covered. He's won a major before, and it's the Masters, so it's kind of a big deal. But he had, like, I forget, 5-6 shot lead or something, 5-shot lead, 4-shot lead going into 18. So there wasn't that much drama behind it. He obviously has rattled off a ton of tournaments these last 2 years, and he's easily establishing himself as the best golfer in the world. And today, it's shocking's probably the wrong way to put it, because it's never when a guy like Phil, when a guy like Tiger, when Rory was in his prime, or Jordan Spieth, when they get hot and they start roaring up the leaderboard, you're never that shocked when they're in the quote unquote prime of their career. But it's pretty crazy to watch, especially when you start the day 4 or 5 shots back from really good players, right? He's chasing Xander Schauffele, who's never won a major, but been very, very successful over the last 5-6 years. Brian Harman, who is the defending Open champion, and Wyndham Clark, who's the defending U.S. Open champion. So these are two guys that have literally just won 2, beside the Masters, the biggest tournaments in the world. And then Xander, who constantly competes in them all. And even if you don't have faith in Xander to win, you're like, well, how's he going to catch him? And then the guy shoots 64. And as Tarico said, honestly, it could have been like 61. His putting issues, as we saw last week, gone. Putting is not the problem. The only question now is this neck, shoulder injury. He's got black tape, like he's an NBA meets NFL player early on in the week. There's no way on God's green earth you could have convinced me to live bet Scottie Scheffler with the neck injury. I was like, God, he looks off. They were saying on the broadcast the other day that, like, he couldn't generate the same speed. He was constantly, just kind of fiddling with it. And then today, as he mentioned, like, I felt great, felt awesome. And he played, I mean, that looked like Tiger Woods or something. That's what that was. And he needed for guys not to run away with it, and none of them did, but he went and got it. And that's what the great players in golf do, right? Sometimes you're going to have the lead, and you just got to hold off everyone. Tiger made a living of that, doing that in major championships, right? Never won a major when he wasn't leading. He took the lead, and then he strangleholded you. He wouldn't let you catch him. Sometimes, though, you just got to go chase, and you just got to go balls to the wall, pedal to the metal, and just fucking let it fly. And that's what Scottie did today. And it's hard. You can't top the Masters right now based on his resume, but this is easily the second most impressive victory of his career. And there's a huge gap. Like, I don't care. You could bring me Waste Managements. You could bring me the players last year. Nothing even holds a candle to what we just witnessed today. Now, we'll get into the course a little later. It was clearly playing a little easier. A lot of birdies were out there, but holy cannoli. What a performance. I mean, he beat Xander by 6. He beat Wyndham Clark by 5, and he beat Brian Harman by 4. Think about that. Like, when you looked at the leaderboard, it's one thing in some of these random tournaments where the field's not as good, or maybe it's a given week where there are lesser names up there, and you have a guy like Scottie Scheffler. You're like, God, if he shoots, he goes 7, 8 under, maybe a couple of those guys shoot 2 or 3 under, and he can catch them. You weren't thinking that today. I'm sorry. Maybe he was, and his camp was, but I watched this shit for a living and definitely gamble on it. And God, I did well today. But it never crossed my mind when the day started that Scottie Scheffler, I guess, didn't have a chance, but I didn't think he was. I thought he was out of it. I thought this was a 3-horse race. And honestly, I thought Brian Harman was probably going to win, then Wyndham Clark, then Xander, and somehow none of them won. None of them won. But like Rory, maybe he's definitely more famous than Scottie. He's not even, now once you're at the highest level, he's not even in the same world right now as Scottie Scheffler as a player. Like the gap between those two is very, very wide. And then you just go to like the American side, right? We'll get into Wyndham here in a second, but the Jordans, the JTs, just look at some of the guys on the Ryder Cup with him. I like Max Homa. Like those guys aren't even in his universe. There's only one guy right now that I think you could even begin to compare and say, well, they might be somewhat similar, and that's Jon Rahm. And it's hard to quantify it now because he's playing in this tour that no one fucking watches. So, like, I'm not betting against Jon Rahm looking good, but I also am not as confident because we don't really watch him play anymore. And iron sharpens iron. Like, is he practicing and playing at the same level than which he would have if he was on the PGA Tour? Because I would expect him, if he had been around, that he'd be competing in all these tournaments right there with Scottie, going head to head. But now he's MIA, which I don't blame him for taking the money. But it's hard for me to be like, oh, yeah, Jon Rahm's just good as Scottie Scheffler right now. How can you say that? Scottie Scheffler's winning these tournaments. He's not winning 54-man fields or, 54 guys, 3 rounds at LIV. Hasn't won one yet. So incredible performance by Scottie, who has the stranglehold. OWGR, I don't care about world rankings because they clearly don't mean anything now when they're not factoring in the top guys that LIV. But he's the best player in the world, and it's not even debatable. There's no argument. And today, honestly, he could win like 3 or 4 more majors, which I think is pretty clear he's probably going to win a major this year. And if he stays healthy for his career, he's got a chance to win several. This is going to be one of the better wins of his career. It's just hard to top what we just witnessed. So congrats to Scottie Scheffler, 64 on Sunday. You're looking at someone who felt good because he ended his round the other day with a par. Xander Schauffele, who I used to gamble on a lot in my younger days. There's no amount of money. I guess he's still, when he's playing well, for top 10s and top 20s, but you can't put money on him to win. And let's face it, I don't think anyone watching today that consistently watches golf thought that he was going to get it done. And then down the stretch, like, to me, the dichotomy between him and Wyndham Clark, I think it was on full display. 16, they both hit the green. They're 2 back at the time, or going into 16. Or I guess Wyndham's 17 under, Xander's 18 under, Scottie's basically in at 20 under. So like, hey, an eagle changes the game if you're Xander. If you eagle this hole, you might win the tournament if you birdie one of these last 2. He doesn't even get close on his eagle putt. 17. Him and Wyndham both knock it. Xander knocks it like 6 feet. Wyndham knocks it like 4 feet. Xander's putt never had a shot. All these guys, the elite guys, are hitting the fairway on 18. Xander right in the pine straw. And then he hits it way over. Now listen, Xander is a fucking excellent player. He is one of the stalwarts of all of our team events with the Americans, and he is what they call on the PGA Tour an ATM machine. He's what everyone acts like Patrick Cantlay is. Patrick Cantlay can't hold Xander's job, and they're best buddies. But when it's nut cutting time in the biggest events, Xander does show up. He just doesn't close it. And for whatever reason, listen, golf's really hard. But you feel it when you're watching him play. You're like, I don't have any faith he's going to hit it. And he doesn't even hit it close. 18, the putt, I'm not on 18, whatever. But he's even in that position. To me, you go back to 16 and 17. Neither putt got remotely close to the hole. Wyndham Clark, he missed on hole 16 for the eagle, but you thought it was going in the whole time. And then he drains it on 17. And then honestly, it's one of the most brutal outcomes I've ever seen from a putt not going in on 18. So you look at those two guys, you go, Wyndham's got the one major, Xander has none. Xander's been a much better player for a longer period of time, though Wyndham, I would say, has immediately caught him. But you watch the two guys, Wyndham Clark had two bad bogeys on the back nine, hole 10 and 14. He easily could have folded. He easily could have just gone away, finished fourth, cashed his $1 million check, right? Yet the motherfucker would not be denied. 16, driver, 4-iron, 10 feet. 17, knocks it stiff. 18, gets a little unlucky with a bad bounce and still gave himself, you can't give yourself a better look at birdie than he gave himself without it going in. So to me, I watch Wyndham Clark, and I don't know how you quantify this. This is like what they talk on First Take about when it comes to basketball players, who chokes, who doesn't. I don't think Xander necessarily chokes. He just doesn't make any putts ever when it matters. That's just a fact. And it's not like he folds and just crumbles. He's right there. It just doesn't happen. And then when you kind of look back, you're like, yeah, it was never going to happen. Yet Wyndham Clark, you're like, God, he's out of it. He's done. He's 3 back on hole 16. And then on 18, he's got a putt to force a playoff. It's crazy how fast he has passed all these guys. Like Wyndham Clark has flown by in terms of right now, how he's playing and how you trust him to play in these big tournaments moving forward. Now, I'm not acting like it's going to last 5 years. I'm just talking in the immediate present. He is clearly better. Like him and Xander are relatively close in terms of like their outcomes, but you trust him more. And then Xander, as I said, is much better than Patrick Cantlay or Justin Thomas or Ricky Fowler or Jordan Spieth. They're all Max Homa, all are other really good American guys. And Wyndham's in a different universe than those guys right now. That's why a lot of people are like, God, does Wyndham have a chance to win the Masters? To me, Xander, the most impressive thing he did the last 4 days is I watched a lot of his Saturday round. He should have shot like even par. He got up and down from fucking everywhere. I think he was like 9 of 10 up and down. Now, the course, it's clearly playing a lot softer. It's much easier to get up and down. But he put on, as someone, and I would imagine a lot of people listening or watching this, you put a wedge in anyone's hand who's like a 5 handicap or worse, they're getting up and down like 10% of the time. Xander put on an all-time clinic on Saturday. And today, listen, the putter, call me old school, someone that grew up on golf in the 90s when the mallet putters didn't exist. You know, even Brian Harmon, who I love Brian Harmon, something about the mallet putter. Like, I want to root against you when that's what you're using. I kind of do. Even though I respect it, even though I understand it's easier to use, listen, I've used it as well. Used to have the Odyssey 2-ball, which I guess is a little technically different than the mallet. I don't know how you define the mallet, just square edges. But regardless, I understand the bigger putter heads keep things square. But I don't know. I'm not asking you to use the Phil Mickelson Cleveland blade back in the day. But I just respect just a normal fucking putter head. But none of these guys use it. And the one thing about Wyndham, who never met the guy, Scottsdale guy, I used to strong. I plan on going back maybe in a week or two to this CrossFit gym. Wyndham goes there. People love him. I mean, love him. Everyone says he's just a great guy. I've never heard one negative thing about him. Most of the Scottsdale guys, Max Homa, Joel Damon, Tony Finau, Wyndham Clark, bunch of high character. Everyone likes him. His caddy, who's wearing the Bob Does Sports Have a Day hat, clearly seems like a cool guy. But the notion that you should be allowed, it's one thing that your caddy help you read a putt. Welcome to professional golf. To go up there with a sand wedge in your hand and stand over the ball to look at the line, That should be outlawed. Think of some of the things we've outlawed. Remember the long putter that got outlawed, the anchor thing? It's like you should not be allowed to have your caddy stand over your putt with a club in his hand. That is fucking outrageous. That's insanity to me. One, it's kind of uncomfortable to watch. And I'm not some hardcore like golf rule guy. Everyone getting up in arms about Rory, the drop that he took on Friday. Like, well, we make too big a deal about this. That to me, though, how could any? It's one thing. I played with my buddy Fonger yesterday. He tries to do the aim point. The aim point, it kind of is what it is now. It's part of the deal. I wouldn't do it, though. I don't even quite understand when they're standing trying to get the which way the green's going, how they can even begin to figure that out with their fingers and whatever. To each his own. I get it. It's not my cup of tea, but if you want to do it, have at it. The caddy thing though should be immediately banned. That cannot be allowed. And tomorrow morning, I think Tiger and Cantlay and all those guys are meeting with Yasser and the PIF. They got to discuss that as well. Can we remove this from the rules? This cannot be allowed. It's over the top. It really is. Brian Harman's a stud. Couple things that are from a big picture gambling standpoint. I think Brian Harman, I've never played Pinehurst. I've definitely watched enough guys play it on YouTube golf, and I've watched enough YouTubes on the course. I think he's going to be a major factor there. I think he's an immediate bet a little money on right now to win that tournament. He's played well now. I mean, at a really, really high level. He's already won a major, so you know that he can handle the moment. You watched him today. Like, the moment's definitely not too big for him. The putts just didn't go in. I think at any course where accuracy really matters, it's kind of a weird setup. It's a very unique thing. He's from the South. I love Brian Harman at Pinehurst. But you talk about a guy, and I watched, because I had so much money on Sahith Theegala, I went to watch his press conference yesterday. And he said he's played with Brian Harman now 5 or 6 times since he's been on tour. And he's like, I think he's one of the better players out here. He's like, everyone talks about him like a little guy. He doesn't hit the ball very far. He's like, I hit a bomb a drive. He's 10 yards behind me. So accuracy is not his issue. He can work the ball left. He can work the ball right. He's an incredibly accurate player. His short game is elite. Today, the putter was a little off, but I would say most of the time he's known as one of the better putters on tour. And I think this is the crazy part about the sport. Like, in golf, guys kind of peak and then they kind of go away, and other guys figure it out. And the one thing you've seen this with Homa the last couple of years, like, he was over 30 when he figured it out. Wyndham Clark had been on the PGA Tour for a while, holding on for dear life. Brian Harman is like 38, 39 years old. He's not, maybe he's a little younger than that, 36, 37, but he's not 27 years old. I think it's fair to say he's playing the best golf of his career. I think Kisner's like 40, and Kisner's basically out of golf going to TV. So I don't know if it's the equipment. I don't know if it's just you get a little older and you got less to more perspective on letting golf just ruin your mind because it can. Hell, it did for me Saturday morning. I want to quit the sport forever. But he has been a revelation because you watch him in these tournaments and you go, I could see him winning another major championship. And obviously the Open's always going to be, because driving distance, not that he's short, but the bomb and gougers can't really separate that way. And I think at Pinehurst, I'm going to look at the odds later tonight. I might spread a couple $100 on him right now, because if he keeps playing well, if that number is 45, 40, 35 to 1, I could see that getting into the high 20s by the time we get around. So props to Scottie, who just chased everyone down and just proved why none of those guys were on his level. Wyndham Clark, I thought, showed a lot of mettle. Xander, the narrative kind of is what it is now. Like, he didn't do anything to change that today. And Brian Harman, just, you see him take off his hat. He looks just like me, little bald guy. He looks like, everyone knows a guy that kind of looks like Brian Harman. He's got to be one of the more relatable looking guys on the PGA Tour. And then a couple other things before we get out of here. I said this last week, and I'm going to hammer it home. I was texting with someone today. The day and age of trying to pick winners now, one, Scottie, he's always a good bet to win, but you got to bet 5 or 6 to 1. So his odds are terrible. I had money on Will Zalatoris. I had money on Thagala. I had a little money on Ludwig. Betting winners is very, very difficult. Top 20s are the place. They really are. Now, I give out top 10s and I sprinkle on the top 10s as well. But the margin for error of the top 10, even when your guy is playing well, is not very big. And right now, Hideki's a good example. I have hammered Hideki these last couple weeks as top 20. And I think at Augusta, the way he's playing, he is an auto top 20 bet. And the good thing is, if you're a little uncomfortable with betting, much money on a golf individual in a tournament, because this is not football where you're just betting on the one team against one other team. There are a lot of variables. Even to get top 20, I got to basically beat 130 guys, right? Half the guys miss the cut. I got to beat all those guys. Obviously, I got to make the cut to have a chance. And then I got to beat, if 65, 70 guys make the cut, I got to beat, however, the majority of them. And it's difficult. One bad shot down the stretch can go from 15th to 23rd, but it does give you wiggle room. And when you can get guys who are playing well, and Hideki's a good example, at basically 2.5 to 1, that's might be one of the best bets in sports, because it would take a lot for me to convince you in an NFL game to bet on a team plus 250. You'd be like, well, yeah, the 49ers are plus 250 against the Arizona Cardinals, right? Like, I don't want to put money on the Arizona Cardinals 2.5 1 to win money line. You wouldn't do that. Not saying it doesn't happen throughout the year, but it's not like people hammer those money lines. Yet in golf, you can get guys, major champions who are trending well, Hideki, and just fucking hammer it. And I hammered it. So congrats to me. Last but not least, that course, it looks spectacular on television. It really does. And listen, I know a lot of people listening to this aren't necessarily like golf geeks, but the way they get it to look like that, and we do the same thing here in Arizona, and I'd never experienced this coming from California, is they basically rip up the grass, they overseed it, and they water it nonstop to grow brand new grass to get it look absolutely pristine green. It's not naturally like that. You have to force feed it. And today, and really this week, it was clearly really wet, especially around the green. And anytime these guys could be playing the hardest course humanly possible in the world, if the greens are semi soft, they are going to score low. And you saw this every single day. I'd wake up here on the West Coast and I'd check my app, and all the guys in DFL teeing off first in the morning on Saturday and Sunday. There are countless guys, 4 under after 8, 3 under after 5. It was very, very scoreable. Now, the course record for 4 rounds, I think, was 24 under, as Greg Norman back in the day. So it's not like Scottie broke the record, but the amount of guys at 20, 19, 16, 15, it definitely played easier. And I would say historically, when I watched this tournament, it felt like it was really, really difficult around the greens. The greens were rock hard. It was very penal if you missed. One thing that was very evident, especially Xander on Saturday, is it didn't necessarily matter if you went to the rough. These guys didn't have that much trouble getting up and down from their rough. And like, it didn't bother me watching this tournament like that. But I do think there's got to be some balance. These guys are good enough to birdie any hole, anywhere, anytime. To add elements to difficulty, if now we're basically only going to get it in the majors, that kind of sucks. Like, and Kisner mentioned it. He's like, I know people root for carnage. I don't even think we root for carnage. We just root for a challenge. And today was challenging against your other mates, against your other guys. Like, Scottie just had to have way more birdies than Xander, but the actual course wasn't that challenging. So I just think humans, like, why we like a good Sunday night football game that's 21-17, the final score, because it's very, very difficult to score. It means good defense is being played. Like, sometimes it's enjoyable to know, like, it's very, very hard to birdie this hole. And the one hole it felt like that has that at TBC is like the 18th hole. That hole is very, very hard. You hook it or draw it too far left, you're in the water. You hit it too far straight, you're in the pine straw. You got to hit a perfect drive, and then it's still pretty hard to hit it close. All 4 days, wherever they put the pin. Yet the majority of their holes felt relatively easy. I mean, the par fives are kind of a joke, kind of is what it is. But I wish the PGA Tour and the people involved would just try to find some balance. And maybe this gets to the argument, and I'm not for rolling any of the equipment or the ball back, but everything's just too good now. These guys are too talented, and the equipment is so outrageously dialed in for them that you would have to grow the rough out a foot and make the greens basically, unstoppable to give these guys a true challenge. And you're only really going to get that occasionally at the US Open or sometimes at the Open when the wind's pumping. And it's just the weather plays a major factor. But it doesn't feel like we get that very often at the PGA anymore. And even Augusta, let's face it, is kind of easy for these guys. It's still a hard tournament, but the group that's playing well that week is burning holes left and right. So I don't know. I'm not trying to make a big referendum on where we're at, but it felt like the people in charge of the grass this week were just a little off. It was still enjoyable to watch. I still enjoyed gambling on it. I still watched probably, I don't know, 25 hours worth of coverage, but it felt like we missed the mark a little bit. The other thing, adding these former players who have a good personality into the mix on the broadcast is a huge addition. It really is. And Kisner is a good example of he's not going to like just talk crazy amounts of shit, but he's unafraid to say whatever about a given guy when they make a decision. Why? Because that's kind of his personality and he says it to their face. And he's very comfortable with all these individuals. He's played with them all for 20 plus years. He knows every guy on tour and a lot of the good ones really, really well. But unlike, and it's going to be very interesting with Tom Brady, unlike a lot of other athletes that end up calling the games, because it's easier in a studio show to say whatever you want, right? It's easier in my job to say whatever I want. I don't go into locker rooms. Couldn't pay me to do that. Not because I'm scared. I just don't want to waste my time. No value there. But, having these guys on site, and they say it all the time with Brandel Chambly, he's actually not that active on the driving range, and some guys get mad at him. I get it. There's a disconnect. He's much older. He's not their friend. I think the relationship Kisner has with these guys and just his personality, naturally, funny guy, just loose, just natural, the mic in his, in front of his mouth. It's been a huge, huge addition. And it's very hard to strike that balance, especially nowadays. Everyone's so rich. Everyone's so buddy in all these sports, to get people that'll just say what we're thinking, because that's all the consumer wants. And we're paying for everything. Those of us watching these events, basketball, football, baseball, golf, you name it, all these sports make their money from us watching television on our couch. We know what's going on. We see we're screaming out loud. So when the broadcaster and the guy analyzing whatever's going on can reiterate what we're thinking in our head, we're like, we appreciate that. And I think Kisner has hit the ground running. One, a lot like Harmon, and there might be something with just these SEC guys. They feel very relatable. Just the type guy that would be very easy to just finish a 12-pack with, watch a football game, and talk some shit about humans. I mean, that's what most of us do anyway. And he's been very, very good at it. Smiley's a little goofy or whatever, but like Kisner, very good relationships with all these players and has played these tournaments, knows these guys well, and just can add anecdotes that some of these guys that they basically fired over the last several years that, let's face it, sounded a little old. It's just different. It's just a little refreshing. I thought their golf broadcasts catch a lot of shit because unlike basketball or football, you don't get to watch every play. They're just kind of jumping between guys. They're going to commercial all the time. And it can be a challenging watch. I thought the broadcast this week, I mean, Tirico is elite at his job. He really is. He is easily one of the best in the NFL. And you could argue he's every bit as good as Jim Nance is definitely more emotional about the sport. But just in terms of and I'm no like broadcast, professor here, but just when I'm watching the two of them, Tirico's every bit as easy to listen to. And you could argue because Jim tries to add all this sappiness, Tirico's better. And the rest of their crew, adding Kisner and adding Smiley, has made it just a little more youthful. And golf historically has always been kind of a curmudgeon-y sport, older, stiffer, richer. And it just feels a little more, obviously Kisner and Smiley are, especially Kisner, I mean, rich dude, but he just feels a little more relatable. And the power in that, like that's always a quality Peyton Manning has had. Colin Cowherd has said this forever. Like Peyton would be, advertising on in his heyday, like Mitsubishi. It's like you ain't driving some mid-tier sedan, Peyton. You're driving a fucking Escalade and Mercedes. But he can sell you on it. And he's still to this day, when you watch him on television, he's just very good at that. Peyton's made hundreds of millions of dollars. He's a member at Augusta National. Like he ain't running in our circles. Yet when you see him talk, or I'm sure if you met him, he's just pretty normal human being, or at least can come off like that. And that's a big, big key on these broadcasts. It's a huge help. And I think golf has battled that more than some of these other sports. Baseball's been good at that for a long time, though they can feel a little old because a lot of their analysts are just older guys. So really, the course, a little easy for my taste, but the broadcast and the Kisner edition, I'll never tell anyone to quit as an athlete, right? It's most of us are forced to quit in high school. A small percentage basically are forced to quit in college. The cream of the crop gets to play something for a living and make money. And even if at the end you're a shell of yourself, until you're not allowed to do what you want to do what you want to do. And I would say just use that rule in life. Well, who's to tell you what to do when you want to do something? But clearly Kisner's golfing career wasn't that long ago. I mean, this guy competed in majors. This guy's almost won the Players. Like he was a really, really good player. Whenever he's in a field now and you look, I mean, pretty quickly he's close to the last. Golf fails you. It's hard. It's a very difficult game. I really hope. I mean, this is purely selfish. Did he just like retires and goes full on TV? Because I think he could be. I think he could be. I don't want to say like Johnny Miller, because part of Johnny Miller was like he was a U.S. Open champion multiple times and just kind of a legendary guy. But I think he could easily be in this sport one of the best immediately, fast. And I don't know how the pay structures. Obviously, if you just somehow get a top 10 in one of these events, you make a lot of money playing golf. And golf's fun ultimately. Though when you're a guy like Kisner and you're not playing well, it's not fun. I really hope he just goes full time into broadcasting. The sooner the better, for us, the consumer, the fan, because most of these tournaments, and today was great, right? And this is what we've been beating the drum. When will we get a really good tournament? When will we get some? I don't want any of these random guys. We watch sports to watch Tiger Woods, to watch Tom Brady, to watch Patrick Mahomes, to watch Steph Curry. We don't want to watch rando after rando after rando. It's okay every once in a while. I'm cool with Boise State making a run one year. But eventually, give me Bama, give me LSU, give me Georgia, give me Ohio State, give me Michigan, give me USC. That's who I want to watch year in, year out. The Final Four. Like, you take Mother Teresa or whatever the hell her name was, Mother, Sister Jean. Give me Kentucky, North Carolina, Kansas, and Duke. Like, more people are going to watch those games. I promise you. Why? They're just more interesting. They really are. So today, when you looked up and you have major champion after major champion, Xander, Scottie on the hunt, Hideki on the move. This is the hard part about golf. You can't control it. You can't be like, Sunday Night Football is going to be, Chiefs, Bengals. Like, you never know. You could give a major, you give the players, and you could just get random guys playing well that week. And that's what's happened a lot of this year. That was not the case this weekend. And I really hope, and I would be stunned if we're not going to get more and more of this come the major season, because Obviously, Scotty's not going away. Wyndham Clark's playing fantastic. You know, a couple of those guys in Live, whether it's Rom, hopefully so, DJ, Kepka. Uh, it's the best, not even close in golf when you have the biggest tournaments and the biggest names / the best players in the mix. That's all you want. Today was fucking awesome. That ending the last hour with those guys, Scotty taking the lead, Wyndham coming storming back, capped off with that putt, which has to be the closest putt in the history of putts from dropping and ultimately somehow not making it in the hole, was as good as it gets.